Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Trump threatens to cut GM subsidies over plant layoffs. Tear gas at the border. There's some stuff happening. And we've known that it's been going on. Lance and I are not immune to these things that are happening around us. So today I'll try to keep it brief before we get his input here, but I'm going to take a little turn for the different and explain to you exactly why we haven't been talking about this stuff up until now. I told Lance, I guess we're going to have to do it. Not that we have to, but that we're going to have to do it so that we can at least get our different perspective in there, hopefully, on this stuff. So we'll start with the border, since that's your friendly redneck liberal. The caravan thing's been going on for quite some time. And I was in a discussion the other day about it, and somebody was asking me, what do you think about this? And, this as they approach and the troops that are stationed there and all this. And I said, well, what I think is that we're focused on the wrong thing. That's what I think. I think that Lance and I have told our audience about, I don't know how many times now, at least 5 or 6 times on different episodes, that the quote-unquote immigration problem is not what we all think it is. The data tells us that we're at net negative immigration. That's right. More people leaving the country than entering. That's what that means. You can look it up. Your government, the Trump administration's Department of Immigration, can confirm as much. So you can check that out. Again, just, from the Trump administration, where we have this massive immigration problem, supposedly. Further on this current border wall issue, all these migrants coming in, again, as this new asylum thing's being talked about, well, should we just keep them out until their asylum hearing? What do I think about that? Again, I just don't think that that's the most important thing. I don't want to say that it's not worthy of an intellectual discussion. You all know, Lance knows, I like a good intellectual discussion as much as the next person. And I think there's an interesting discussion to be had around that. But I'm sorry, there's so many other things going on that merit our attention and time. And that is just not one of them, because again, as I explained before, there is not an immigration problem, at least not in the respect that we're talking about it, which is this mass influx of illegal immigrants, which isn't the case. Net negative. And then the last thing I'll say on the immigration point, we'll just get off of it because and we'll get Lance will have his 2 cents on all this. Don't you guys worry. The last part is, as we covered like a year ago now, you correct me if I'm wrong, Lance, but I think it was upwards of 80% of all illegal drugs that enter our country come by sea. By sea. Under the jurisdiction of the Coast Guard. Yeah. Yes. Not by land.
Again, published by the government.
Yes, again.
That is headed up by President Trump.
Exactly. It's a little flip from what you guys are used to, because typically I'm kind of trying to, at least talk down Lance a little bit, or not join in quite as much on, and it's not all the president. I'm getting to that. I'm not just upset at the president, because he's going to do this stuff, and, he's elected and he can do it whether or not we like it. But we're going to get to the media here in a moment, because that's, I think, important. Now, the GM situation, okay? What's happening here? This one's not quite as much media. Oh, no. One more thing on the immigration. The tear gas.
Go right ahead. Yes.
Yep. Sorry. I left that out. The right cable news media, and notice my wording there, cable news media, okay? Because this is important. Televised news media. They would like you to think that this is minor tear gas. Just to be clear, again, government-funded organization who studies different kinds of biological and chemical deterrents and weapons. There is no lesser form of tear gas. There is tear gas. It's basically all the same. Okay. Now, if they're talking about like pepper shots, which were also fired, then you say that. It's different. They're not the same thing. You don't say, well, we fired pepper shots, which, are basically a lesser form of tear gas. No, they're totally different. They're not the same. They're not a gas substance. So anywho, again, you can look that up. And then on the left side, it's that the frickin' Holocaust is happening and Hitler's back and we're, gassing children. I'm sorry, but that totally degrades what occurred during the Holocaust when millions were murdered. This is not the same thing. This is 3,000 or so migrants. By the way, not all of whom were gassed. A very tiny little percentage were tear gassed, which generally speaking sucks and is terrible. And I would not want to go into a room with tear gas, but it doesn't kill people. So let's keep that straight. And again, some people might get mad at me for this. The reality is, you may not like the way that we chose to deter them, but we had every right to do that. It is our border. And if we wanted to shoot them, we could do that. It doesn't make it right. I'm not saying it's right. But legally speaking, if somebody wants to enter our country and isn't willing to follow the process or in some way feels threatening to a Border Patrol agent, they legally have the right in our country to exercise any and all necessary force to protect themselves. So it could have been worse. Okay. It could have been a lot different than this. And I'm not saying that it was good. I'm just saying, let's keep it in perspective. This isn't millions of Jews being murdered. Okay. Not the same thing. Now.
Feel better?
Yeah. Without any further ado, we'll get to the GM thing because it's a little different. The point in all this was simply that I've come to the conclusion I'm not going to keep saying the media as a blanket statement because you know what? The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, even a lot of radio programs, I think they're doing an okay job. Most of them. I think they're doing an all right job. I think that particularly the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, National Geographic, I'll bring them in too. I think they've got some honest to God journalists who really are trying to do a good job of bringing the facts to the table. Because the Wall Street Journal isn't immune to reporting on things when Trump does something that is contrary to facts. They don't just ignore it or try to explain it away. And they are generally considered a slightly more conservative-leaning paper. So I'm going to say from now on, the televised news media. And what I mean, I'm referring to CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. My problem is that they call themselves news outlets. We'll let Lance dig into all this here. But of course, no show would be complete without his proper introduction.
I think you laid it out pretty well. I mean, on why you've chosen for us not to talk about it.
Which we're now doing.
Right. But at some point you have to, because I mean, if I had my way, I'd be coming on air and pointing out what I want to point out are all the things that the president says that then he either A, doesn't follow through on, or he contradicts himself 2 weeks later because he's just trying to tell people what they want to hear. He is doing a masterful job at staying in power by telling people what they want to hear, and then people aren't holding him accountable for it. And I wish the news media would hold them accountable for it. And that's what I want to do. But it tends to be, then I start to rant. So I've given my partner here a wide berth, and we've done some other things, but finally he thinks that we need to come on air and talk about some of these things. And I think if you listen to him, hopefully you're not right or left and got mad when he talked about your side, but Justin pointed out how both sides are not doing us any favors as far as their reporting. We're not getting just unbiased reporting from either side. And that's what's upsetting and at the same time scary for us.
I don't know, because we've talked about this before. Can any reporting truly be unbiased? Probably not, because people are writing it. But the difference is,
but you can do a better job than what certain groups
are doing
in the media are doing.
That's right. It's almost like, when I read the Journal and the Times, most articles I read from both of those papers, I typically feel like that the author of that article, the journalist who wrote it, is making an effort to not just be, totally biased. I at least feel they're making that effort. Not balanced, because we've talked about that before. Balance isn't always due, right? Just because Trump says something ridiculous and the article's reporting on the facts of the situation doesn't mean it needs to balance that out by saying, okay, let's dig up some stuff that Democrats have said bad. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying an effort to report it in a very straightforward and factual manner. I feel like those outlets that I mentioned have just abandoned the attempt at trying to bring this to us in any kind of real news format. It's 2 minutes, a minute, 30 seconds, any of those time spans on what's actually happening. And then we're going to loop this footage for the next 30 minutes as our panel here debates why either it's not nearly as bad as it sounds if it's in support of the president. It's not bad at all. It's everybody's blowing it out of proportion. Here's what he actually meant. Basically we're just going to defend everything left and right. Or it's the opposite of that, which is this is the worst thing that's ever happened in planet Earth. Our country's doomed. The whole world's going to die. Just doomsday. It's terrible. This is the Holocaust 2.0, which it's not, just like trying to defend the president, say, well, this is what he meant. Well, I'm sorry. Did you talk to the president? Are you going to attest to the fact that you know what the man thinks? So that's what I'm trying to get at. I don't know, Lance, what you think about all that or the commentary on my feelings about particularly the border wall. I don't want to hop to GM too quick. So if you got anything else to add, now's the opportunity.
Well, I totally agree because we've talked about it and done the research that one of the problems that business has is they can't fill the jobs that they have, and immigration would help that. And immigration has been a part of American history, and I don't think we should fear immigration. I think it's been a tactic used by the president. I don't want to say racism, but yet he's played on people's racist leanings to stop people from coming into the United States at a time when we need workers, and we need workers to keep our economy going. So if you're an economist or you are a part of our economy, which if you buy stuff, you are a part of our economy, you should be concerned about that. It's not a good thing for us to be short this many workers. We're really at almost a zero factor or negative number when it comes for businesses trying to grow a little bit. One positive thing that'll come out of it, this being so, and the president doesn't want to talk about it, our costs are going to go up because employers, as we've already seen in the last 6 months, are going to have to pay workers more money, which you and I have both talked needs to be done anyway because minimum wage should be at least doubled from what it is in most states to equal what minimum wage was back in 1980. But when you do that, then all of a sudden the cost on goods is going to go up. So if you're one of those people that want to keep costs down, you honestly should be for immigration because more workers in the system means that employers are not going to have to pay workers more, which will keep costs down. So I just totally people missing out and on this whole border issue and the fact that people are leaving our country. People are, we have that negative number of people from the government who are going back to wherever they came from rather than staying here in the United States. So immigration is not the issue. Immigration wasn't the issue. It's not the problem. And unfortunately, we're missing the bigger picture. But that's what the president has the right to do so that he can stay in power. But as we're starting to find out, it's not necessarily good for the country, nor is it good for the people who support him. And that's my concern, is that some of the people who support him aren't looking past his rhetoric to see how this is hurting him. Hurting them, not him, because he's staying in power.
Right.
But hurting them. Segue into the GM piece. You know, a lot of the people who supported him in Michigan and Ohio are now feeling the pressure because of some of the decisions that the president made and has run on and implemented.
Yep. It's going to be interesting to see as the Democrats take control of the House and Republicans maintain control of the Senate and the presidency, what the next 2 years are like as we head toward the next presidential election. Before we get in full steam here to the GM situation, we're going to take a brief moment to remind you what we're doing here. So I'm hoping that people tuning in felt that it was a little out of character for me to do an opening monologue like that, or of any kind, because usually I try to get Lance in right away and we have a couple laughs and try to keep it on the up and up and then have an honest and open conversation about stuff. But I think that it's better for those of us in these positions. And I'm not trying to put Lance and I at the same level as somebody like an Anderson Cooper or a Rachel Maddow or now I told you his name. I reminded you, what's his name? Sean Hannity. Criminy. Memory's going.
You're there. You found it.
Yeah. Not trying to say we're on that same level, but any of us who are influencing what other people think, who have any listeners, 10 or 10,000 or a million, whatever it is, have at least some obligation to, I think, acknowledge when we have these thoughts and feelings. Lance and I have had many conversations before a show where we've gotten stuff out of the way, where we've been so frustrated with something that the president's doing before talking about it, because we don't want to just come on air and just constantly hit him left and right, because I don't know who Lance voted for, and I guess he's never officially told us, but he's not who I voted for. And my guess is you can probably gather that if Lance voted, that's probably not who he voted for, or he's just a really good actor. But you can probably get that. But at the same time, we're making an effort to at least have the conversation, and try to look at the other side, even when we don't do it as much justice as it should be done. We're not trying to convert you into liberalism.
But I'm not going to swallow a lie to support the other side. And I know that we've received some not so nice emails about that.
That's right.
But you can't tell me, or I shouldn't say that. You can't expect me to accept a lie from the president with information from his own government, where he's going against the information of his own government, and then say, well, you're not supporting the president. I don't care who my leader would be. If I have information from the government that they are in charge of that repudiates what they're saying, then I'm going to be critical, because all I want is to be spoken the truth. And I think if you go back and listen to some of our episodes, and today we're going to do one where we predicted some of this, that, the middle class tax cut and things that, people were going to start to pay the piper further into this, and we're starting to see some of the repercussions of that. I don't take that as constantly bashing the president or not accepting his side of it. It's just that the facts didn't play out as to what he was saying. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I got into it with someone who was a supporter of the president this weekend, who I said, the tax cuts have made the Republicans a deficit government. And his argument was, the supporters' argument was, yeah, but the deficit's not going to be as high as they're saying it is. And I said, wait a minute. You're Republican. For 4 years, you talked to me about how we needed to cut the deficit. Now your argument is not that, yes, we are in deficit spending with the Republicans, but, well, the deficit's not going to be as bad as they're saying. Wait a minute. You said when you guys all got, you people all got in control, which you had the House and you had the Senate and you had the presidency, you're practicing deficit spending, and you said you wouldn't do that. So why does it matter? And I couldn't get them off the fact that they just wanted to argue that it wasn't going to be as high as everybody's predicting. I said, but you're admitting that the Republican Congress and the Republican president are practicing deficit spending. We're making the deficit worse. And he goes, yes, but it's not going to be as bad as, I said, what do you want me to support? You guys told me forever that you were going to, 8 years of Barack Obama ruining the country, by God, we're going to straighten out the deficit. Well, you didn't.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not picking a side.
Their refusal to acknowledge that was their position. That's the thing that gets me. It's like,
they're on record as saying that that's what they would do.
And they still
voted
don't want
against all kinds of laws to stop the deficit increases as much as possible. I'm just holding them accountable for their words. I'm not trying to bash them as bad people at all. That's not, you told me one thing and now you're doing in the face of everything, you're doing something else. That's all I'm holding them accountable for, are their own words and their own actions.
Yep. I'm
not bashing them. And if you said, well, you need to support them. Well, wait a minute. I can't support them if they didn't tell me the truth at one point or another.
Right. They were either lying then or they're lying now. It can't. And the way that you overcome that is like, well, you guys don't think people can change their minds. No, they need to say that then. Cause that's the problem is they don't come out and say, well, I've given it more thought and we've looked at these numbers and we've realized that we made a mistake by saying that we need to rein in spending. Now we think that the way to, generate economic growth is by increasing spending, which in the long run will save us. But that's not the argument. That's the whole problem. That's where I think it all falls apart. Cause it's not that, these opinions are beyond reproach and that there's no way that you could ever change anything that you've ever said. We're not saying that, but there isn't any acknowledgement that no, you were on record as having this position and now you're not refuting that position. You're just accepting a new position that's directly in contradiction to the old one. So you either need to shed that old position and go with the new one, or not accept a new position. But you can't have both. You can't be, well, I'm against increasing deficit spending, but I love what the president's doing, which is what our congressman in a town hall that I was sitting in literally said. He said, the reason I started the Freedom Caucus, I'm talking about Jim Jordan. He is my local congressman and Lance's. He said in this business town hall at the end of last year, I started the Freedom Caucus with the commitment to not vote for things that increase deficit spending. And then the rest of the town hall proceeded to talk about why everything the president had done was so great. And it's not that I dislike either of the things he's saying. That's not really relevant as much as it is. They're not compatible. You can't be against deficit spending and then champion the man who has increased deficit spending. It's the same thing for the Republicans because it was this whole,
It seems obvious, right?
They were all about the stimulus package, right. And now it's, the Republicans are letting the deficit get out of control. Well, wait a minute. You guys are the ones that told us that we had to spend this money, in order to stimulate the economy. So why isn't that the same way for Trump? Why can't he do that? Why is it wrong if he does it just because it's Trump? It's like either shed that old position and acknowledge that you've gotten rid of it, but you just can't have both.
But here's the problem.
That's, I think, what we're getting at.
Here's the big problem is as a politician, you can't do that because then people won't vote for you. And so they all want to stay in power. And we get the government.
Why won't people vote for him though?
Well, I'm just going to give you a historical reference that's popped into my head. And that's George Bush the Elder.
Yeah.
Okay. He ran and we got no new taxes. Well, then it appeared to him, he's like, crud, we're going to run a deficit and I don't want to increase the deficit. So I'm going to sign some tax bills. When people said, see, he lied. And John Kerry, when he changed his position, he was attacked as a flip-flopper. So we get the government we deserve because we, as the voters, won't accept the fact that I had a change of heart. I got in here and I figured out, I can make the economy stronger if I pass a stimulus package and give a tax cut to big business. Okay. All right. Well, let's see if it happens. Because you and I would say, okay, well, let's give it a chance and see if it works. Okay. Now, if it doesn't work, we're going to beat you over the head with it and say, see, it didn't work. The economy's not any stronger and we're further in debt and we didn't get all of the infrastructure that we need. And we'd attack on those points, but we wouldn't attack 4 years from now saying, see, you lied. You did this and you said, but you didn't. And da-da-da. But that's what the voters do. And so now we've put our politicians, Republicans and Democrats, in a position that they can't really change their minds by finding new information because we're going to vote them out of office as flip-floppers or liars.
And I would think that's what we should want.
We should want. I agree. No, I agree with you 100%. And we probably have listeners, probably most of our listeners agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why we're not in the mainstream because the majority of American voters don't think that. Oh my gosh, you changed your mind. You lied to me. No, I changed my mind because I got new information. And that's what I would want leaders to do. It's what I want my leaders to do.
Right. I want them to get smarter.
But we're not the majority of people that go to the polls and vote. So they then go to the lowest common denominator. And that is, I have to stay true and make my people happy, which President Trump is great at. I'm acknowledging he's great at telling people what they want to hear. However, it looks like it's starting to come back to harm some of those people and they don't recognize it. And that's the scary part. That's where you start getting into a leader getting too much power who can tell people what they want to hear to stay in power, and people don't hold them accountable for what they say. That's what scares me about any government like that.
And that's kind of what we're looking at with the GM situation. Before we do the brief tidbit on that, the reason that we're here, which I was attempting to start in on and then I got off track about 6 minutes ago or so. The reason that we're doing this is because TrueChat as a network is working to provide podcasts that educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And if you don't think that we uphold those standards, we're big on accountability. We want to know that. And we try to address when people say things that have some kind of intellectual basis to them, even if they're in opposition to us. So ethics@truechat.org, you can email the ethics team and let them know if you think we're not upholding the mission, but engage with us on the other front. If you just disagree with us, it's @TrueChat.org on social media. Let us know your thoughts at TrueChat.org. The GM situation, the president tweeted the following, quote, "Very disappointed with General Motors and their CEO. We are now looking at cutting all @GM subsidies, including for electric cars," end quote. So that was his tweet. He's not happy that GM has announced that they're going to discontinue making the Chevy Cruze, which, for those of you that don't know, is exclusively made in Ohio. So the plant there is shutting down, and I think it's about 1,600 jobs is what we're looking at that'll be lost as a result. And for those of you who possibly don't know, Ohio was pretty strongly in support of Trump. I mean, it went red pretty significantly. It wasn't one of those years where it was super close.
Right.
Now, in the primaries, it voted for John Kasich, the only state. Not surprisingly, went for John Kasich. But I wonder, those 1,600 people, that's not enough to flip us back to blue. But I wonder how much that starts to bleed into the people here of, well, he said he was going to bring manufacturing back. and manufacturing's leaving in our state.
Well, because
it gets more personal then.
But how many coal jobs have been created or saved? How many steel jobs have been created or saved by some of the things that the president has done? So is he still a plus? And, you have to make that number a little bit bigger, because 1,600 jobs probably affects closer to 10,000 people.
Right. Because you have a lot of other jobs related to those 1,600 that might go away, whether it's their suppliers.
You also have all the people who are dependent upon that person working, or that family working in the factory.
Might be even higher than that.
Sure.
So when you get into
but I think you have to be careful, because the president has brought jobs in other manufacturing areas in Ohio. But I find it interesting is he said, we're looking into this. He isn't saying he's going to stop the electric car thing. He's looking into it. And as we discussed off air, he doesn't have the power to do that. He can't stop that.
Right. He has the power to look into it.
Right. He can look into it.
Yeah. He has that power.
And he can ask Congress to pass a law.
Has that power.
And sign it, and taking money away from GM. But obviously he's concerned, because we know if you are a student of presidential history, right or wrong, Ohio is very important to winning an election. And these days it's Ohio, probably Florida, and then Ohio. I don't know. It's pretty close. I mean, Florida in the last few elections has been very, very important to electing the president.
Yes, it has.
So I'm sure it's starting to challenge Ohio. But then you have in Ohio, and not only Kasich, who is kind of underneath the radar looking at running again, but you also have the Democratic senator from Ohio that was just reelected, Sherrod Brown, that has put out feelers. So I'm sure that, President Trump is doing what he can to placate Ohio voters to remain on his side.
Yeah, because he's going to not only may he be faced with things aren't as good in Ohio as they were prior to his tenure, but he might also be faced with incumbents, possibly more than one, from Ohio, which we know he couldn't beat out before. I mean, not a single other state gave Kasich the win, but Ohio did. And Trump got a lot of other states, but he couldn't get Ohio. Even when I think most people probably realize, we're going to go vote for Kasich, but he's probably not going to get the nomination.
Right. They still supported him.
Right. So if they were willing to do that at that point, I'd imagine with loss of jobs and 2 incumbents from Ohio, if that happens, I don't know. I can't see him keeping it. Maybe you get into the 3-way kind of split thing that we talked about, where we've actually got 3 candidates again, 3 real, live contenders. But either way, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Other than that, the GM thing this is what Lance and I have talked about. Manufacturing can't stay here forever. And the auto industry in particular has had its own problems. So let us know your thoughts at TrueChat.org. We've got a special guest Friday, so be sure to tune in. Ryan Clancy, Chief Strategist at No Labels, is going to talk about the Speaker of the House and what's next as the new House prepares to take over.
Getting back into politics a little bit.
That's right. Tune into True Chat Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere fine podcasts are found. For the State of Us, in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.